Hello and welcome back. We have an exciting session ahead of us. Looking forward to learning how blockchain can play a role in sustainable supply chain. So, quick round of applause to our speakers. Alberto, you'll be moderating the session. So welcome you all to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the attendance of this panel. I'd like to start this panel with a quick introduction. I'm going to use, like the order I'm going to use is what I see on my screen, starting with Garance first. If you could quickly introduce yourself to the audience and speak a little bit about your work in blockchain at Carrefour.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending. I'm Garance Osternaud. I'm leading blockchain program for Carrefour. Carrefour is a French retail company with a long-standing commitment in food transition and becoming a digital retail company. We started using blockchain in 2018 for food traceability purposes.
Thank you, Garance. Duncan.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everybody. So Duncan Johnston-Watt, I'm co-founder and CEO of BTP, Blockchain Technology Partners. So we're an enterprise blockchain company, and really our focus is on providing a platform to enable many different business use cases. The focus for us being on multi-party innovation. And so supply chain is a classic multi-party problem. And so looking forward to the conversation here.
Great, thank you. Daniela.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Daniela Barbosa. I'm the Executive Director of the Hyperledger Foundation, and it is a delight to be here today at the European Blockchain Convention. I want to thank actually Victoria and Daniel and the rest of the team for such a great event that I've been watching the sessions, and the panelists here today for joining me as well. Hyperledger Foundation, for those of you who don't know, we're an open source consortium of companies. We really are made up of three parts. One is our open source developer community, which is really at the core of what the Hyperledger Foundation is focused on. They're developers that might come from small companies or large companies, academics and other types of organizations come together to work on code in a common open governance model that is under the Hyperledger Foundation and the Technical Steering Committee. Our goal is really to continue to build those communities within the Hyperledger Foundation. There are now 18 different projects, many of them that the people here on the panelists have spoken about. And obviously sustainability and supply chain has been a big use case. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Daniela. Pedro.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Pedro Lopez Belmonte. I'm blockchain lead at Richemont. Richemont is a luxury group focused on the different luxury groups, on different luxury products. And, I work since a few years on different blockchain initiatives, trying to tackle different aspects, both on the upstream and downstream parts. So happy to be here. Thank you very much again to the organization, and looking forward to the conversation with all of you.
Thank you so much, Pedro. And a quick introduction about myself. I'm Alberto Cozer. I am with Nestle, the Swiss-based food and beverage company. And I have been part of our blockchain journey for the last 6 years, where we leverage blockchain mainly for supply chain and traceability of some of our products. But I am a blockchain aficionado for many, many years. Very soon, I would never imagine I would say that we're going to be a deck coming in maybe a couple of years. But blockchain has grown so much from its inception and its beginnings, and the possibilities are endless. What we are seeing ahead of us is really just the dawn of a new era when it comes to how things get interconnected through blockchain. And I'd like to start our conversation today We've had a very similar panel last year, and some of the panelists that participated with me last year are here. And I'd like to start with a reflection of what has changed from last year to this year, especially when it comes to supply chain and because of the pandemic that we're still going through. And I just heard yesterday, there was an interview on TV of a doctor saying we're halfway through the pandemic, right? So which didn't make me very happy hearing that. But let's say we're halfway through the pandemic. From the beginning of the pandemic to now, supply chain has suffered a lot, and there were a lot of possibilities for blockchain and how blockchain could have helped. What we talked last year was more about adoption and how adoption was still shy in many organizations, especially large enterprise. Companies were still trying out blockchain, what the possibilities were, what blockchain could bring to the business. What has changed from then to now? And I would like to start with you, Garance.
Thanks. Since last year, we are continuing expanding the blockchain program. We have now a blockchain in each one of our 9 countries of Carrefour. We have new products launched. We have textile traceability with blockchain, which is new. We have about 14 products under blockchain, which means more than 1,000 reference with every batch traced and traceability available in our stores. We are also expanding the blockchain we have with new suppliers providing the same products. And we had some invitation or new relationship with CPGs or industrials who wants to join the blockchain and to build a blockchain with us, which is, from my point of view, a good signal of the brand using the power of blockchain to communicate on their good practices. For the moment, we are still focusing on our main use case, which is transparency on the traceability, because it's what our consumer is looking for. When you go to Carrefour store, you go to buy some products, and with the pandemic, you said so, you want to know where the product comes from, who produced it, and I have there a producer, and it's not for nothing. It's very important both for Carrefour and for the consumer to get to know the history and the way the product was produced. So that's our main use case. However, as you said, the greater tech doesn't make it all. So we're also working on the adoption and the visibility of the product with blockchain in our store, so the consumer doesn't pass it and benefit it all the way around with packaging, with visibility of the QR codes and so on.
Great, thanks for your updates, Garance. And Duncan, I'd like to hear from you a little bit. I know you haven't participated in the panel last year, but I'd like to get your take on what do you feel changed in blockchain in the last 1 year?
How long do you have? I guess, I mean, there's the way we look at it, and obviously we're really providing the platform to enable businesses to explore new and interesting use cases. And I think what we're seeing is provenance has always been important, and provenance clearly is the underlying kind of underlies product traceability and also transfer of ownership in many different fields. So I guess we see that as, if you like, distilling that and that being a foundational concept that can apply across not just multiple industries, but also even within supply chain. It's not just around food. We're seeing a lot of interest, particularly around things like cobalt, and that being a foundational concept that can apply across. And so in that context, there's a company, we're a member of the Hyperledger Foundation, I'm pleased to say, and I've been involved with them for many years. And there's a fellow member called Circular that's very famous now for its work looking at the sort of whole supply chain around EV, so and the battery industry. And to follow up on Garance's point, a lot of this is driven by consumers, wanting to know that when they, how was this car built? If it's a car that I'm looking at, where did we source those components? And I think so. What we're seeing is an increasing drive from the consumer end that's probably just going to keep going. So I'll stop there. But that's certainly for us one of the major observations we would make.
Amazing insights. Thank you, Daniela. I'd like to hear from you. What's your opinion?
Excellent. Well, I wasn't on the panel last year, but I did watch it. And, one thing that delights us when we see people like Nestle and Carrefour and Richemont talking about real products, right, in production, real blockchain use cases that are reaching the consumer. So I think more of those stories and more of those lessons learned that were coming out at events like this and other types of workshops is really different, right? Because a few years ago, maybe it was just a POC or, a small pilot somewhere within the organization. And now we're seeing, very large retail companies actually implementing and building these networks out, so I think it's quite different. And I'm sure all of you on the panel today can actually talk about, the scalability of these. If you look at the industry in general, what we see and what the industry sees is the blockchain adoption. There was a Deloitte 2021 global blockchain survey recently that came out, I think, in the early spring, and about 81% of the technologists and executives that were surveyed said that the technology is now scalable, right, and it has achieved mainstream adoption, and that is important, right? So when you have the executive level support at these big companies, it's no longer just a small group in R&D trying to experiment and trying to really understand the technology. It really changes the implementations and kind of the momentum of these projects. I'll echo what Garance and Duncan said. Also, is on the consumer side. There was an Accenture survey that came out, I think it was summer of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. Don't say we're in the middle of it now, but in the middle of the first wave of COVID, that said that 45% of the consumers were more interested in buying things that they can track in the sustainably, that they could buy something that they have said this has been sustainably produced and delivered through the supply chain. So I think that's what's changing. Is I think at the top level of these companies, executives are understanding that the technology is scalable, that it's real, and it's providing return on investment. It's not cheap and easy to do, but there is a return on investment that's a long-term strategy. And then at the consumer levels, consumers are demanding it. And there's also regulation, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later. There's regulatory requirements. So when you see those three things kind of come together, right? And Hyperledger Foundation, we've been here for 6 years. We've been at this for a long time. When you start seeing that, you start seeing the maturation of the market and of the technology and of the developers and the engineering teams at large companies like yourselves who are bringing these solutions forward. So it's very exciting to be here. And the other pointer, we talked about this when we did our prep, is you're not seeing news articles every single day. So-and-so company has a blockchain, right? These are projects that sometimes it's even hard for us here at the Hyperledger Foundation to find out who's building using Hyperledger technology, because it's not a hype. These no one talks about the Oracle database that's running our website, right? We talk about what the website actually does in this scenario. So it's very exciting to be here. Our Hyperledger Foundation community, folks like Duncan and others who've been supporting us for the last 6 years are seeing the fruits of our labor, which is fantastic to see.
Amazing, great, Pedro.
Well,
what's your take?
I don't know if there is anything else to say. Yeah, I think in the last 6 months since our last conversation, what I've seen is an acceleration, and it's an acceleration driven by the consumers. I very much relate to what you just said, Daniela. I think it's straight to the point. I think there is a consumer demand, and this is driving everything else, because at the end of the day, all companies, even those companies that work on the B2B business, eventually are driven by consumer needs and by consumer trends. So in terms of sustainability, I think along with NFTs, if I can mention that, those would be, if you ask me what are the hot topics of this year, now that we are almost closing it, I would say those are the two ones. NFTs on one side, and here we are to speak about sustainability. That's the other topic. I think the conversation is intensifying. The consumers are more and more careful about what they buy, and companies have now. Is not a question of if it's important or not. If companies are not taking care of their sustainability or their supply chain, or of acting responsible, there is a high risk of being out. So the action is here. We are taking actions, all of us, in order to move towards more transparent and more comprehensive supply chain. And I would add, if I may, now that I opened the NFT topic, that in the future, if I can open the point, we need to start also thinking not only about supply chain with physical goods, but also with digital goods. And it's something I think that is starting to happen now. After I think after each wave of a new innovation or a new thing, we have the hype. Everyone starts focusing on this hype, trying to understand, trying to see if it fits in their strategy. But after that passes, and whatever topic is confirmed, I think companies, and I think it's happening today with NFTs, start thinking, okay, but how can we tackle this in the long term? Okay, and I think there is going to be a mix and match between traditional supply chains and new ways or new supply chains that are going to be established after this, digital and Web3 revolution.
Great, thank you. My thoughts on that, compared when I look at what happened in the last 12 months since we talked last year, is that if in supply chain we were barely scratching the surface of the possibilities, and sometimes many companies trying and being shy in adoption, because we had the perception of blockchain more of a repository for data. And now we're starting to see true value. And the one thing you mentioned, the NFTs, I think more than what NFTs, the most important part that NFTs brought for us is truly the making tokenization sort of a common thing in blockchain. And it opens up the doors of possibilities for blockchain and how you can bring value to consumers through blockchain. When we talk about consumers, Garance, I think we talked before about the challenges we have for regular consumers to spot blockchain. At least I think that might have been the experience of Carrefour. We have a little bit of that as well. You can always interact with blockchain through a QR code. But can you talk a little bit more about this and what Carrefour has been doing to make sure that not only consumers spot where blockchain is, but also see the value and why they should interact with blockchain?
Yes, what we are doing is harmonizing the consumer interface. The consumer can see when they scan our QR code, so they have a common experiment when they are scanning all of the 40 products we have now in blockchain. Will it be some sheets? Will it be some fresh product in France, in Spain, and so on? They have the same experiments, and they have now more modern, more neat and clear information. So we are building our own standards in the blockchain. That's important for the consumers. That's also important for us because it helps us in the industrialization of our blockchain building. It make it easier for us. It make it more clear for the consumer. It's making it more easy for the producer to join, and that's important. And we hope that help also the interoperability of our blockchain. And that's a good point. In a concrete way, we change the packaging so the consumer can spot the QR easily. And if we go through the store, we're making some signalétic in the stores and in the e-commerce website of Carrefour, so the consumer can spot it. And being there with you today is also a way to let know to the consumer that they can join and they can have access to the data. Maybe the last thing we can do is the importance of the network with the consumer, with our store, but also with IBM, for instance, who's our partner to build the blockchain. And we can have some contact with you, of course, with Nestle, but also with other companies that want to make blockchain a standard, to make blockchain adoption easier worldwide. I can't hear you, Alberto. I guess you're mute.
All right, I was on mute. Thank you, guys. There's an interesting thing in what you said is, something that reminds me the importance of connecting. Blockchain is a fabric. So you're connecting the information that we add on the blockchain for our products. And once these products get on your shelves, you add your information to that. And that's really what helps drive value to the consumers. Duncan, I would like to start with one of the questions from the audience for you. We have quite a few popping up here. There's one, and I'll start with Duncan because he's the next on my roster here. But is the application of blockchain in your supply chain driving costs, or do you see, in your case, do you see based on your experience, the application of blockchain driving cost reduction? If it's driving cost reduction, in which way have you seen that? If it is not, why we have the same costs, or those are growing due to blockchain? How you see this, like blockchain and cost in supply chain?
All right. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is we need to be careful when we talk about blockchain that we're talking, I think all of us, around a permissioned blockchain. We're not talking about public blockchain. We're not talking about Ethereum or Bitcoin and proof of work. So there is no intrinsic overhead of using blockchain, I would say. In terms of its benefits, I think improved transparency obviously is one, but I think also in general, there's a challenge when you're dealing with multi-party, complex sort of multi-company, multi-party interactions to ensure that there is, both efficiency and trustworthiness, so that you can rely on what is happening across a supply chain or across any complex transfer of ownership. And so in that scenario, I think what blockchain is providing us with is both improved or enhanced efficiency, because largely it is automated. It's governed very often by smart contracts, which I hope we talk about a little bit. So we move up from, the blockchain is really just the distributed ledger at the end of the day, but it's what's running on it that's way more interesting, I would say. And so smart contracts are a way of automating business logic. And the fact that you are using a DLT gives you that guarantee of immutability and ensures or assures everyone that the data is the data and not some rather pernicious or even accidental change to that data. So I think it's almost like, I mean, we would say, and of course, blockchain DLT has been around, as we all agree, for almost a decade now. But at the end of the day, what it is providing is ultimately an enabler. It's something that's enabling new ways of doing business, or better ways of doing business. And we are not islands, none of us. It doesn't matter whether it's B2B or B2C or B2B2C. Whether we're doing this as an individual or whether we're doing this, within a sort of a business context. We are interoperating the whole time, and whether we're doing that at a technology level, at a standards level, at the end of the day, we are hyper connected these days. So I think it's that's where it will really score in the long run, I think. And as Daniela was saying, we haven't solved every single challenge, but we are solving issues around scalability and so on. So and provided we do that without sacrificing the fundamental value prop of the underlying DLT, then I think we're in a good place. Final comment I would make, just in terms of what Pedro was saying, is it's what we can learn from what we can distill and learn from supply chain is really important, because then it can be applied in other domains. So it's become, I think, a great proving ground for a lot of new thinking. And so now it's a question. I studied maths, math, as they say in the US, many years ago. And one of the things you're always looking for is to generalize and come up with things that can be applied across multiple domains. And I think supply chain is giving us that. So it's taught us a lot about provenance, and now we can apply that to NFTs, or we can apply it to many, many different areas, I feel.
Thank you, Duncan. You touched one of my favorite topics in blockchain. That's smart contracts. For sure, we'll come back to that topic. I think that's as you beautifully put together, is smart contracts drive automation that helps drive value in the blockchain. Daniela, we use, some of us here, I don't know, maybe all of us here, we're leveraging Hyperledger, right, in some of our blockchain solutions. What do you see as in terms of, like, still on the question of cost? Because certainly the adoption of Hyperledger ends up bringing a cost in terms of setting it up, and I can speak for my own experience. That cost at the end of the day, it's negligible. It's very small on what we're doing. It doesn't get really translated into the cost to the consumers at the end of the day. And we see the value, in terms of helping with promotion of some products, kind of offsetting that cost. Is that your experience when you see other companies adopting specifically Hyperledger as well?
Mm-hmm. So, well, to clarify, I think the three of you, Nestle and Carrefour, Hyperledger Fabric is the platform, is the DLT that you have. So a couple of points on that. Obviously, for 6 years ago, Hyperledger was Hyperledger Fabric, and then we had Hyperledger Sawtooth, also used very often. Duncan's quite familiar with it in supply chain use cases. So one of the things that has happened over the last 6 years, and even more so in the last 2 years, is here at Hyperledger Foundation, we've increased the amount of projects, not because they're increasing in, we want many of the same, but in different requirements. So, for example, if you think about requirements around interoperability, we have a project called Hyperledger Cactus that is addressing interoperability between networks, which becomes a requirement as you scale out these networks, right? Or a network of one is no fun. So we here at Hyperledger Foundation have actually also expanded what type of open source projects we've brought into the foundation to serve the needs of these very different projects. One of the things that on the cost question, so obviously Hyperledger is open source. So Hyperledger, all our projects are Apache licensed. It's free. You can download it. You can build your billion-dollar business on it. You're never going to have to pay a license fee. But there is a cost to partnering with a technology provider, with a vendor that you're working with. And those costs are just typical of enterprise software. I will ask the questions of those of you on the panel here is, how many systems does your current blockchain DLT, right, your Fabric implementation, how many systems in the enterprise does it touch? How many integration points do you have to make for that data that is on the blockchain to interact and to provide the products and services that you want to provide to your suppliers downstreams and to your consumers as well, right? This is enterprise software at its best, right? It's very, very, very large to see. So the cost of doing enterprise software deployment is pretty analogous to that. On the open source front, I always use the analogy of, open source is it's like a free puppy. You get a puppy, someone gives you a free puppy, and then what happens? You have to nurture it. You have to, buy it stuff. You have to implement it. You have to train it. Costs associated with using open source is obviously, the point there. The other thing is that we also have built a very large commercial ecosystem supporting this. So when you have code, when you're building products on open source code, you want to have a commercial ecosystem that can support you. You want to have experts that can provide support to develop on top of that DLT platform. So really, when you think about implementing blockchain and what the costs are, it is enterprise software. Right. It is probably, as a big company, you're going to need partners and vendors to come and help you with and experts. But we always recommend bringing in core people on your teams, upskilling them so that they understand the subject of smart contracts, right? If you don't understand smart contracts, you don't understand, verifiable credentials or any of the other techniques from a DLT perspective, a blockchain perspective, you're going to have to constantly go outside. So, the recommendation is, and I think the panelists here have all done this at these big companies, is putting together engineering teams in-house that understand the technology and building that common knowledge that you can build. And that's going to save you a lot of money in the long term because you will become experts in running these networks. And then you're able to, in your ecosystem, right, your networks, the companies that you work with one another, the companies and the partners that you want to bring into your networks, you're able to educate the market as you go along. Core message is it's enterprise software. It's expensive. It's long. It takes a long time, right? An ERP system, when you're implementing a new ERP system, for example, it's not going to take you, 6 months and you're ready to go. I hopefully that answers the question a little bit from our perspective.
It does. Thank you. There is one thought from what you said that just occurred to me. You're saying it's an investment. You got to invest on building expertise and building know-how. And that reminds me of like when companies started to connect their internal network and systems to the internet. Many companies saw that as a pure cost because there was limited value out of that connection. And today we see that the companies that were faster at building that know-how, they gained a competitive advantage that put them upfront. When we talk about digital transformation and the revolution that is ahead of us, in 10 years from today, the companies they're investing right now in building that expertise, that know-how in blockchain, are the companies that will take advantage of the decentralized apps, of large-scale tokenization, and a number of other benefits, smart contracts, automation through blockchain, and so on and so forth. So that's a very interesting thought. Pedro, I would like to bring to you the discussion of tokens again. There's a couple of questions from the audience on tokenization. And the first question is tokenization a key in the supply chain in order to have all data involved in a shipping? If so, how is it going to be applied? And I'm going to give you one hint. One of the things that many companies are investigating when it comes to, because we're talking about sustainability as well. Tokenization helps with sustainability because you can have smart contracts on the blockchain that you give a benefit to consumers by just engaging with the blockchain. You can exchange tokens that will offset carbon footprint, for example, or tokens that will help with clean water resources in another part of the planet that you might never visit yourself. So how you see tokenization in supply chain, and what are the lessons that we have that you have learned in your experience?
Well, I think tokenization is key, right? We always see tokenization for consumer goods or you know, in you know, downstream business cases directly related to the consumers. But when it comes to the upstream, to the supply chain, I think it's essential. First, because what you say, you can use and leverage smart contracts, not only associated with you know, the products you are producing, but with the materials that you are using, with the production process, with a lot of things. And for example, automate the carbon offsetting. Or if eventually you are going to provide this information to your consumer, create different processes to ensure, for example, that the material, you know, in manufacturing, sometimes you buy materials for a new project, and then it's used for another project because for this project is not arriving on time, and you just take something that you had in your stock. So to orchestrate all these elements, to really your manufacturing process, and you know, to ensure even data continuity, you can leverage all these elements through tokenization. And I think I very much agree with again with what Daniela just said. I think it's essential to build internal knowledge. You know, everything when you're working in the enterprise world, everything is a cost, right? Everything it's especially these days where we have become more competitive and we need to reduce cost. We need to make everything faster and cheaper. We're looking on every euro, pound, dollar, or Swiss franc that we spend, right? And I think it's very important to build this knowledge. I agree it's going to create a competitive advantage. We have in Amazon, for example, a very simple example. And I think the main reason is because the best way to learn is by doing. You know, it's very nice to read books, even to, you know, listen to others speaking in a conference. Hopefully that's nice in this case. But the best way that you can learn is by doing, and the best way that you can build competence is by doing. And I think the smart contract, what you just said before, the smart contracts topic is very unknown and is very complex, and it has a lot of possibilities. And only when you start working with them, you can start envisioning the possibilities and the power that it have. And they really unleash a lot of automation that you can leverage. You can make your processes way more efficient and even simplify greatly your technical landscape just by leveraging on a blockchain and some well implemented smart contracts.
Can I jump in, Alberto? Because I think,
of course,
I don't want people to think that you have to have every skill set in-house, because that would be like saying, I'm in my office, I need to know how the plumbing works, I need to know how the aircon works. I mean, there's a balance here. And I think, Pedro, you fortunately steered us in the right direction, because it sounded, from what you were saying, Daniela, you need to know everything about everything in that stack. Well, no, that's crazy. because what you do need is the ability to build knowledge at the right level. And that is, I think, at the level of things like smart contracts, because that's where you're meeting or bridging the gap between the platform and the business. And the language enables that because it doesn't tie you to the underlying implementation. The whole point about smart contracts is they will run on what they will run on, but it's the contract that you care about. So I would sort of qualify what was being said a few minutes ago by saying, the role of, I'm not a Nestle or a Carrefour or a Richemont or a Walmart. We're a technology company providing tools to enable people to not have to, spend their entire life trying to stand up networks, trying to stand up, DLTs and so on and so forth. And it's interesting to Daniela's point that Hyperledger Bevel was announced just 2 days ago, which is now an initiative within the Hyperledger Foundation that is also helping with the management and operations side of the house. So yeah, it's building up know-how and expertise, but making sure that when you learn by doing, you're not learning plumbing. You're learning, how to capture your business and improve that. So sorry, I had to say that because otherwise,
no,
I think people
very well put.
Just to point out, I totally agree with you. I don't. My point was not to say each company needs to be the internal team and doing them by themselves, because if each company needs to be build an internal team on any innovation subject that comes up, we will need probably 5 times the people that we are on each company. So when I mean build internal knowledge, is that I actually see the opposite. Many companies, they don't build any knowledge, and even if in our case we are working with partners, right? And but still we have a small force that is learning about that, because in my opinion that's the way we companies can rely on partners, but at the same time we can steer those partners in and really point them out to the direction we really want. That's actually
investment banking. It's the same thing, right? The risk model is what you care about, and your risk model is going to be different from my risk model, and so on and so forth. But how you actually run that risk model is just middleware.
Exactly.
Sorry. I didn't mean
no, that's very well put. And I was going to say, sometimes we have companies, they're blockchain. That's a common mistake. A lot of people conflate Bitcoin with blockchain, but blockchain, you have blockchain consultants or companies, they're specialized in blockchain, and they come to present solutions. And if the internal teams are not prepared to hear and understand what they have to say, it's more often than not that I see companies presenting blockchain to large enterprise, and people don't really understand what they're saying, and they fail to really see the future. There's a question for Garance here. Are you using blockchain only with high added value goods or also with more expensive ones?
We're using it with all range of food products. We do not sell very expensive products. We have so maybe most expensive product we have is meat, but it's important product, and it's maybe some products with consumer requirements and consumer interrogation, not to say anxiety, we have to answer to. So we have some cheap or basic product. We have some tomato, we have some oranges, we have some meat, we have some fish. We have one bottle of wine about 5 or 6 euros a bottle. It's not very expensive product because it's not what we do. And we truly believe that quality and transparency is for everybody. So we did not started with very premium product. We started with average range product with our private label brand. now we're going with some organic products, but it's not the first thing we address because we truly believe it's for everybody. And when we have traceability in all our countries, it's not just for French consumer, it's also for Roman, Polish, Argentinian consumer, because everyone deserves it.
Okay, do you want? Go ahead.
Yes. No, I was also thinking about permission blockchain and the sustainable costs of blockchain, because it's something we often heard. And we wanted to highlight that we build it first in-house, as you said, to build our knowledge. And then we turned with IBM partnership, but we carefully built it at the beginning, and we carefully develop it now with a permission blockchain and with an attention to the way we mine and the way we are using blockchain, but because it's too silly to spoil all the effect, all the benefits of transparency and good practicing in agriculture ways, with a bad development from a tech level. So it's really important to have this internal knowledge, as you said, and I totally agree with you, to focus on what is more important for our consumer, and who knows our consumer better than ourselves.
Yeah.
Great. There's one question. I would like to bounce this to both Duncan and Daniela, perhaps starting with Daniela and then Duncan. That it's about what Duncan said, that we're using a permission-based blockchain. That is true. The three companies that are here, we're using a permission-based blockchain, among others. We also have some initiatives in, at least I can speak for me, we have some initiatives in public blockchains as well, as we test the waters and we understand what drives better value for our consumers. But Daniela, can you start talking a little bit more about this? There's like permission-based blockchain. So it's a private blockchain, and interesting. We'd like to know more about how that user journey begins. What if does the user client need to provide to be part of the blockchain? So how you connect this, right? People confuse that just because we're using a permission or private blockchain, which I translate that as not being Ethereum or Bitcoin, then the consumer cannot connect to that blockchain, which is not right. Can you speak more from the Hyperledger Foundation point of view, how to clarify that question? Because that question happens more often. I see that very often.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the basics is, a permission blockchain. So you are on a network. You are permissioned to become part of that network. So that consortium, right, has governance that is very specific to that network. It is of known entity, so you understand who's part of that network. They have rights associated with it. In Hyperledger Fabric, for example, there is channels so that the specific participants within that blockchain network can communicate via the channels without showing the data, right? So if Nestle and Carrefour are doing exchanges of products, you don't have to display the prices and the quality and the quantity or anything to everyone on the network, right? They just need to know that maybe that transaction between the two parties came. In the world of permissioned and permissionless, it's really changing, what it was 6 years ago versus what it is today around using permissioned networks and permissionless networks. So actually, using the Ethereum mainnet, for example, we have a project here at Hyperledger called Hyperledger Besu, which is an Ethereum client, and you can run that either as a permissioned private network or into the mainnet as a public network as well. And we're seeing hybrid use cases across the board. Absolutely. And I'll let Duncan address this because he's certainly there in the front lines with customers doing that as well. And then if I can just, before going into that, very quickly talking about high value goods, and I think Pedro, maybe you can talk to this as well. We're seeing, supply chain use cases with Hyperledger in like airplanes and military and spacecrafts, where one piece that is being tracked on these blockchain networks can be worth $10 million or even more. And the provenance of that information is super, super, super important as well. So I would love to talk, if we have some time, really about verifiable credentials as we get down to the level of how do you track these pieces as well. But Duncan, I'll let you address kind of the permission and permissionless question, because I know you have a lot of experience there as well.
Well, where I would draw the distinction is, if you want to buy a Bored Ape, you have to do it if you know what a Bored Ape is, and you want to be a member of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, then you're going to be doing that on the Ethereum mainnet. And if you're the poor person that accidentally sold your Bored Ape for 3,000 instead of 300,000 US or the Ethereum equivalent, then I'm very sorry for you. But leaving aside those crazy things, and by the way, the person or the bot that bought that spent the equivalent of $32,000 in order to make sure that transaction went through super fast. So they bought 75 ETH to do that. So, or something like that. Not 75, sorry, but the Bored Ape was listed at 0.75 over ETH instead of 75 ETH, but the personal bot that bought it spent the equivalent of 32,000 in order to see that transaction through. I imagine consumers do not want to be in that business of, it's going to cost me $32,000 to find out whether this product it was ethically sourced or not. So I'm making a serious point here. The business may be backed by a blockchain or a DLT, but that doesn't mean in this context that everybody that is engaging with Carrefour, to pick that example, has anything to do with the blockchain, because they're running an app on their iPhone, and all they're doing, and it's not a wallet, it's an app. It's just a plain garden app. So God forbid that they're actually interacting with the blockchain. That's besides the point. What they're doing is, and this is to Daniela's point earlier, is enterprise middleware at the end of the day, not even enterprise software. And therefore, you're building an entire sort of set of applications and services on top of that. You're probably using a service-oriented architecture, blah, 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 blah. And eventually, that will then present itself, or some fraction of that will present itself to a customer who wants to scan a QR code and figure out where something came from. So I think, there are levels of trust here. So, we have to trust Carrefour at some level are going to give me an iPhone or Android app that is actually, secure and presents information that they are comfortable with. The way they source that information when it comes to a supply chain, it's far more critical outside of their control that they have reliable information, because within the bounds of Carrefour, there is a lot of checks and balances. So it's once you move outside of that and you're trying to establish the provenance of, a raw material, was it sustainably and ethically, this is important, ethically sourced, was child labor or modern slavery involved? These are just as important as the environmental aspects. So I would say in this context, we're not asking every consumer to interact with a blockchain permissionless, private, public. And really it's about, any more than you would say, hey, I want to just jump on the SWIFT network. The SWIFT network is an interbank payments network. It's not a network designed for consumers, and you would not be allowed anywhere near it, nor should you be. So I think it's understanding that this is a very sort of sophisticated, multi-layered world that we live in as enterprise, and what we're doing is backing that or underwriting that. I like to say underwriting that using a DLT. So you're underwriting information and using a DLT, but it's not what a consumer is likely to be interacting with anytime soon.
Thank you, Duncan. We are probably around 3 minutes left. I would just like to address, and I'll throw something here for Pedro and Garance to confirm. There's a question here. Didn't you all have private systems following the supply chains already? I mean, before the blockchain, are there applications, informations you couldn't access before? And I'm going to give my answer, and let me see if you two concur with that, and what you would like to complement. And the answer is yes. We had systems that were tracking that before. Those systems were very efficient. What were we missing? I don't think we're missing much. Now, there's possibilities that blockchain brings in terms of value when it transforms this set of isolated systems or systems that are connected with some suppliers. Now we have a true fabric of every single person participating into that is adding to that data. And this is the true value that it brings in the long run. And that complements a little bit of the other question about how to ensure credibility of information. Well, once you have this fabric, you have the information that's verified by multiple sources, especially in the supply chain. You know, you have someone that is let's say the farmer, and then there's the transportation in the middle. There's an initial warehouse, and there's another transportation. There's the initial factory that will receive the raw materials, the production line. Then it goes into a retailer, and so on and so forth. We have very few minutes left. Pedro and Garance, I'll start with you, Pedro. Do you want to complement to that?
Yeah, I'll just do it shortly. I think, and I'm going to link this to the private versus public or permissioned, or so I agree with all you said. I think we are just building the fabric, the interaction, and leveraging on what we all in the same industry across different industries have in common, and I think it's very important to take into account the conversation. It's not public versus private. I think we need to start speaking about decentralization. Public versus private is so obsolete that it doesn't make sense. It was at the beginning, okay, what do you prefer, Ethereum or Fabric? That's apologies, no offense, but I think that's stupid right now. We are so beyond that, because I think the level of decentralization, the number of partners and members validating and verifying the information, it's what counts. So at the end of the day, a private permission, a public permission might be as valid as the other, right? And I leave you to Garance, as I think we're out of time.
Yes, so the only thing I could add is the importance of real time. When we had traceability before the blockchain, we had to connect with the producer asking for the documentation and get it back through mail, through any system. So we couldn't have it every batch a year. We couldn't have it at the moment the producer made the action and so on. So it was documentation, time and cost, both for us to ask the documentation and for the producer to give it back. So now we have a connected system. We have an authorized system which allows only the farmer or only the vet to add some vet information, not the farmer, and so on and so on. And we have it for every batch. So we have quality data, both in the information we have, the moment we have the information, and the quantity of information we get through the blockchain. And that changed a lot for us. And this transparency, we share it with the consumer, which is the only thing. With exposition of API, and it's also transparent for the consumer. It was said earlier. Okay.
Thank you, guys. I think now it's with Daniel. Otherwise, we'll be talking here for hours and hours.
Yeah,
really appreciate it. Really like this panel.
I think we should leave something for the next time, right?
For next year.
Exactly.
When we meet again.
Thank you very much to all panelists. Thanks. It was a very interesting discussion. We got a lot of questions from the audience, which is always a good sign. So thank you very much, and I see you next time.
Thank you for your
Thanks,
attention.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.